This might be the most controversial Cthulhu-inspired film you have ever seen, because it combines indescribable ancient gods with quantum mechanics. Although In the Mouth of Madness, which also belongs to the Apocalypse trilogy, is more famous when it comes to creating an atmosphere of the unknown and the eerie, this one surpasses it. The story begins with the sudden death of an old priest, and when the nun discovered him, she only found 2 relics, a finely crafted silver box and a diary. To figure out why he appeared here, the bishop opened the diary and discovered a secret unknown to the world. It turned out that the deceased priest had spent his whole life guarding an abandoned church, and as for what was inside, not even the Pope had the right to know. The priest had come to the church to find a successor, but before he could explain his mission, he suddenly passed away. Inside that box lay the key to open the church. The priest warned future generations never to attempt to peek at what was inside. But in order to find out what this really was, the bishop still went to the abandoned church and opened the door to the hidden chamber. However, after seeing what was inside, he immediately wrote a letter to a friend for help, claiming that he had discovered something incomprehensible. The next day, physics professor Barak received the letter delivered by the nun, so he hurried to meet with the bishop. At the bishop's repeated request, Barak followed him to the abandoned church. On the way to the chamber, the bishop roughly explained the situation. The church was built in the 16th century, but the thing in the chamber was at least 2,000 years old. Soon they arrived at the deepest part of the church, and only then did Barak finally understand what the bishop meant by incomprehensible. In the chamber, they saw that what was being worshipped was not Jesus, but a glass container filled with green liquid. The room was surrounded by countless crucifixes, clearly set up to ward off some terrifying force. At this point, the bishop also showed Barak an ancient book placed beside it. Its contents were recorded in Latin, Greek, and more than a dozen other languages, and the original text had been revised many times, as if deliberately to conceal what it truly was. Even stranger, the green liquid gave off an unusual impression, as though it was something that had never existed before, but had begun to change a month ago, with the powers of earth and sky shifting along with it. The next day, Professor Barak returned to the church with equipment, and in the sky both the sun and the moon appeared at the same time. Just as he was about to go inside, his attention was caught by a homeless man. He was praying devoutly to the sun, and the 2 ants crawling across his face made the sight even more bizarre. That evening, Barak and the bishop had a heated argument, with Barak insisting that the thing's purpose was unknown, and it was best to keep it sealed as the church had done for over 2,000 years. But the bishop disagreed, pointing out that Barak's stubborn faith in common knowledge limited true understanding, that truth existed on a more microscopic level, atoms or even smaller, and so the book had to be translated and verified through science. What the bishop said happened to fall within Barak's field of quantum mechanics, so he decided to translate the ancient book. To speed things up, Barak wanted to involve some of his graduate students. Hearing that participation would earn them credits, the students didn't even ask what the work was, and they moved into the church with all their equipment. Besides them, other students from different departments also arrived. While they were installing various devices, they suddenly noticed that the homeless people around the church were staring motionlessly at them, which looked very strange. At this time, doctoral student Lisa was inputting the ancient texts from the book. The computer automatically translated them into English, and the first passages resembled the Bible, roughly saying that Jesus had sent angels to check whether the thing inside was about to be released. The bishop also arrived at the church then, noticing that there were even more homeless people gathered around. Their words sounded normal, but the bishop couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. With his arrival, Professor Barak was ready, and they moved their instruments into the chamber to scan the glass container. Yet, when the lights came on, the container still looked strangely dim, as if it was absorbing the surrounding energy. Weird things soon followed, starting with Catherine, who was sorting through translation results when she saw the window suddenly covered with worms. She immediately called her classmates over, but within seconds, the entire window was blocked by them. Meanwhile, radiology expert Susan brought in test results, showing that the residue on the glass container was 6 million years old, even though humans had only existed for about 3 million. Inside the chamber, Kelly and Walter were gradually drawn to the green liquid, and Kelly asked why they didn't just take a sample to analyze. Brian then showed them a translated section from the ancient book on the computer. Kelly took a look and was shocked to find that one section was actually about calculus, and it appeared in a book from 2,000 years ago, which was simply unbelievable. Kelly stared at the jar and kept stepping back, accidentally injuring her arm. Later, Kelly returned to her room and saw many homeless people standing outside the church. She remembered hearing that people with schizophrenia often repeated the same actions, and after a day of observation, she realized these people had not moved at all, as if controlled by something. Etchinson finished his work and was about to head home, but as he stepped out of the church, he saw a pigeon nailed to a cross. While he stood there in shock, a group of homeless people suddenly blocked his path. He tried to take another route, but one of them suddenly rammed half a bicycle into his body. As these eerie events kept piling up, Brian couldn't help but ask Birak what the liquid really was. After running various tests, he found that the green substance seemed to be alive, constantly reorganizing itself. Meanwhile, Lisa translated more of the text, and its contents became stranger and stranger. While they were still deep in discussion, Susan entered the chamber alone, only to find that the once sealed container had started leaking liquid, which floated upward against gravity to the ceiling. Curious, Susan stepped closer and saw the liquid forming a pool on the ceiling. At that moment, she was hit by the liquid, choking and coughing violently before collapsing in pain to the floor. Minutes later, she stood back up, but her expression was blank, her eyes empty, as if she had become a walking corpse. At the same time, Brian also detected energy fluctuations coming from the chamber, and if this energy grew strong enough, it could affect the surrounding matter, possess the ability to control thought, and even to open space to travel through time itself. Birak asked Brian to keep this secret for now, to avoid unnecessary panic. However, after returning to his room, Brian immediately told the truth to his girlfriend Catherine, warning her to be extra careful. While they were talking, Mullins caught a glimpse of Susan passing by, and curious, he followed her. He trailed her all the way to the chamber, but Susan suddenly vanished. At that moment, the instrument sounded an alarm, and Mullins walked over to check, completely unaware that Susan was already closing in on him like a phantom. Later that night, when the students had all gone to rest, Professor Birak confided in the bishop with some of his theories. If the universe contained a power that could control everything, then there must also exist an opposing force, dark, negative, and inhabiting a space opposite to our own. The liquid in the container might be such an existence. The bishop believed this knowledge should be revealed to the world, but at that moment, a strange sensation swept over them. The room suddenly turned cold, as if something unseen had just passed through. Meanwhile, 3 researchers were having a heated argument outside the church. Frank thought the bishop was delusional and even accused Professor Birak of dabbling in superstition, then decided to quit this meaningless research. Unable to reason with him, his 2 companions left him outside alone. As Frank prepared to head home, he suddenly noticed a group of people staring at him from afar. Susan also walked out of the church, her eyes fixed directly on him. The chilling atmosphere made Frank's skin crawl, and just as he tried to escape, he realized his feet were surrounded by a swarm of beetles. While he struggled in panic, a homeless man suddenly lunged at him with scissors. At the same time, Lisa's translation work had made new progress, revealing what seemed to be a warning. Do not be deceived by Satan, for some will be chosen by him. Beside this passage was a strange diagram, though Lisa could not understand what it meant. Exhausted after a long day, Lisa was just about to rest when a dark figure suddenly appeared outside the door. That was Susan, whose behavior had become increasingly strange, and she climbed onto the bed with a blank expression, getting closer and closer to Lisa. Elsewhere in the building, those still awake were being controlled by Susan one by one, while those already asleep experienced a bizarre dream. In the dream, a shadowy figure told them that because it could not broadcast directly into the conscious nervous system, it could only use dreams to deliver an important warning. Before it could finish speaking, Walter awoke in shock. At the same time, Professor Birak had the same dream. He thought it was only an illusion, but the bishop revealed another secret. The priest's diary recorded that anyone who came near the chamber would have this same dream. Over the decades he guarded the church, countless such occurrences had taken place, as though it was meant to serve as a warning. Meanwhile, Brian was still looking for Mullins, and when they entered the chamber, they did not notice the body lying on the ground. After they left, liquid from the ceiling dripped into Mullins's mouth. Elsewhere, Kelly called for Catherine to return to bed, but the night's eerie events made it impossible for her to sleep. Then Catherine noticed that the bruise on Kelly's arm had changed into a strange pattern. What they didn't yet know was that Lisa's latest translation revealed Kelly as the one chosen by Satan. Kelly herself felt increasingly unwell, planning to get some rest, but Calder arrived to tell her that a meeting was about to start in the lab. Then he went to notify Lisa, but found her staring blankly at the screen, typing frantically. Soon the others gathered in the lab where Professor Birak asked if anyone had dreamed after falling asleep. Unexpectedly, everyone had dreamed of the same scene. So he theorized that people from the future were using quantum mechanics to travel through time and space to send them a warning. Suddenly, all the instruments lost power at once. As Birak and the others prepared to head into the chamber, Catherine called them over. They looked outside to see Frank standing blankly in front of the church. Under their horrified gaze, he was devoured by beetles in seconds, leaving only his suit behind. As panic spread, Calder appeared, singing hymns. With a twisted expression, he used a piece of wood to cut his own throat. Although the bishop quickly tried to bandage him, he could not save him, and was forced to give him last rites on the spot. Meanwhile, Susan and Lisa, now under control, carried the green liquid container out of the chamber and into Kelly's room. Soon, Walter arrived to warn Kelly to escape, but he froze at the terrifying sight before him. The entire ceiling was covered in green liquid, pouring straight into Kelly's body. The others tried to flee, but at the church entrance they found every exit blocked by homeless people. The controlled researchers and students also appeared, and even Calder had returned to life. They launched attacks on the remaining survivors, and anyone touched by the green liquid was instantly taken over. Catherine and the others had no choice but to hide in a room and block the door with furniture. From the window they saw the homeless people still standing motionless outside. Brian considered escaping to seek help, but the moment he jumped down, he was surrounded and forced to climb back inside. It was then that Catherine realized Walter was in the room next door. He described Kelly's horrifying transformation. After absorbing the green liquid, her stomach had swollen like that of a woman about to give birth, but soon her stomach collapsed again, while her skin began to decay as though it had been scorched by intense radiation. After hearing Walter's account, Professor Birak deduced Satan's true intention. It was clear that Satan sought to use Kelly's body for rebirth, and her transformation had now reached its final stage. At that moment, the bishop hiding in another room suddenly saw Calder walk in, but instead of searching for him, Calder stared at a mirror and let out a chilling laugh. Not long after, Kelly awoke from her slumber, and Satan had completed its rebirth through her body. With just a single glance, it shattered the wooden door of the room, and the controlled researchers launched an even fiercer assault. Then Satan noticed a makeup compact on the ground, and as it called out for its father's name, it stretched its finger into the mirror. It seemed the mirror was the passage to the dark world, but the compact was far too small. At this moment, Calder appeared again and brought it to a room with a larger mirror. From behind the cupboard, the bishop peeked out and saw blinding light shining from the mirror as Satan slowly pushed its hand inside. The bishop instantly realized that Satan could never be allowed to pull its father into reality. So he grabbed a fire axe from the floor, ready to risk his life to stop it. With Brian restraining Calder from behind, the bishop drew a cross in the air, then swung the axe down towards Satan. But in an instant, Satan grew a new arm, showing that ordinary physical attacks could not harm it. Ignoring the bishop, Satan continued reaching into the mirror and pulled out a crimson arm from the other side. Seeing her boyfriend about to be taken over, Catherine leapt forward, hugging Satan tightly, and together they plunged into the mirror. The bishop immediately hurled the axe and shattered the glass. The next second, all the controlled researchers collapsed simultaneously, and the green liquid inside them turned into white smoke. The homeless people surrounding the church dispersed, and Walter quickly ran out to seek help. Not long after, the few survivors were taken to the hospital for treatment, but Brian kept staring at the broken mirror, unable to let go. Suddenly, the dream returned again, and the shadowy figure told them. The message came from 11 years later, in 1999. As the figure's face became clearer, it was revealed to be Catherine, the one who had leapt into the mirror. The next second, Brian jolted awake, and as he walked to the mirror beside his bed, he slowly reached out his right hand toward its surface. Was the evil truly sealed away? As the second film in the Apocalypse trilogy, Prince of Darkness blended in certain Cthulhu elements, and even though Satan's father never actually appeared, the fear and dread it created gradually drove the characters toward collapse and madness. By the time of the third film, In the Mouth of Madness, the director finally made it into a pure Cthulhu movie, but it's clear that many of its shots still carry the shadows of Prince of Darkness. Take this classic dream within a dream sequence, for example, which catches viewers off guard every single time. In addition, the open-ended finale of In the Mouth of Madness was clearly inherited from this film. In the last scene, the director added a small Easter egg. The protagonist's hand trembles as it reaches toward the mirror, and his eyes seem to stare not only into the mirror, but also directly at the audience beyond the screen, creating the illusion of breaking the fourth wall. In a way, the screen itself is also a mirror, and director Carpenter seemed to be hinting to the audience that while the evil might appear sealed, it could shatter the dimensional passage at any moment and return from the dark world once more.